India was able to bomb more than 13 Pakistan Air Force bases, radar stations, command and control centers, apart from bombing 9 terror base camps and headquarters, including the one of Lashkar-e-Taiba at Murid and Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur. What does this say of India's dominance in this battle? And of course, the commentary that's followed. Joining me now on this India Today special broadcast is Colonel John Spencer, a US Army veteran, an analyst and chair of the Center for Urban Warfare Studies. Colonel Spencer, welcome on India Today. Information just coming in. 15 BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles were fired at Pakistan military bases, apart from the targeting of 9 terror camps. What does this say of India's intent with the missiles finding their target?
One, it shows an undeniable military superiority that India was able to launch those missiles and hit every target, which is no easy task. There's radars, there's interceptors, there's all kinds of things, but also shows the precision. India was not going, escalating. It was responding to being attacked both from a terror attack and from the Pakistan military. So those very specific precision-guided munitions that can hit within 3 meters, essentially, was a very big choice to make sure they're hitting what they want, to send the exact message that they want, which is we can hit any site in Pakistan that we want, but we're showing restraint as a sign of strength and establishing a new doctrine, basically.
Explain this new doctrine in your appreciation as someone who studies urban warfare very closely, the action on ground and what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said about dealing with Pakistan's state-sponsored terror.
Yeah, it's been really amazing to watch in a short amount of time to basically establish a new strategic doctrine, which is no easy task. The first part of it was that any terror attack will be immediately responded to with force. I've been to Mumbai. I've studied the 2008 Mumbai attack. That's a very different approach, even in Balakot in 2019, to say we will respond with overwhelming but precise force to any terror attack. And this is basically establishing a new red line for India not to seek other means and first respond with military force. But then there are other aspects to this which are really important. I mean, the comment about terrorism and talk. So terrorism and then we negotiate and seek diplomatic means don't mix, just like blood and water don't mix. That was a very powerful statement. Then the other aspect was the no nuclear blackmail, right? So this state sponsorship of many terrorist organizations, especially Lashkar-e-Taiba, with the Pakistan ISI trained, financed, and deployed into India to do attacks, that nuclear blackmail will no longer be the excuse to why people should say that this should be accepted. India is saying no longer will this reckless, basically, nuclear blackmail be the reason that this is allowed to continue, which I think the entire world should take note of that. Everybody usually steps in because these are, Pakistan has a nuclear weapon, saying, look, you gotta not respond. You have to keep this at a certain level. Absolutely, India did do that. It provided immediate responses proportionate to the objective that they were trying to achieve, but no more nuclear blackmail. Just because you have a nuclear weapon in the world, let alone if you're a state backer of terrorism, doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. But India also showed, in order to establish this new doctrine, you have to have deterrence. And India showed and validated their military superiority, both offensively, so being able to hit any site, but also defensively. So Pakistan wasn't able to hit a single site in India, even though they targeted civilian and military sites. They weren't able to.
That's a very interesting point to make this. So India was able to establish military superiority both in offensive operations and in defensive operations. Now, the choice of targets, because as an academic, when you study it and in your military appreciation, you're an armed forces veteran, you've served overseas, you've battled terrorism, you've also been to India after 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks. The choice of targets, Lashkar headquarters, Murid Ke, Jaish-e-Mohammed, one of the most important facilities, that Masjid Subhanallah, Markaz Subhanallah in Bahawalpur. Is that the strongest possible message to state-sponsored terrorism, we can hit you at your home.
Absolutely. And it's limited, right? So this is where you have, even I've heard in India, people wanting unlimited goals. Like you got to go destroy it. You got to get them while now is the time. Those specific targets, training camps, infrastructure, were directly attributed to the attack on India. So that's the proportional use of force that was very used, what we call smart power, right? So being able, and then immediately communicate to everyone why those targets, how they were hit, what they were hit with. That's been a uniqueness to this war as well. The transparency of the Indian military and government going, this is what we hit. This is why we hit it, so that it isn't possible then to escalate like Pakistan did by launching military capabilities. That was so even in response, and maybe we'll talk about that, when India then responded to that attack, it was very tied to the counteraction and the goal being achieved, the deterrence goal. So anything used to launch those drones, the radar systems, the launching pads, and then a demonstration of capability, a message.
But just as you very rightly pointed out, Colonel Spencer, it was a demonstration of capabilities. You know, that India can target Pakistan, whether it's in Skardu in Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or in the heart of Pakistan's Punjab province, you know, take out a radar station at Pasroor, or very close to Mangla, the radars that manage their Honky HQ 9P, their air defense system. What does it say of Chinese weapons and system? The fact that a PL-15 air-to-air missile was found almost intact, 100% intact, perhaps propellant spent, but no target hit.
Yeah, it's definitely revealing. War is always the test, right? So you have war on paper and you have war in reality. India demonstrated both their investments were the right ones in Indian-made products mostly, with some other products, and Pakistan, backed by Chinese mainly, with a little bit of Turkish capability, showed that their capabilities weren't what they thought they were. And India was able to destroy any capability and hit any target it wanted. So there are going to be a lot of rethinking happening here, and there should be. This is a new India. This is a new doctrine. Pakistan now gets to make decisions. I'm sure it will keep investing in Chinese technologies that are now shown to be not as capable as they probably were sold as being, but also China's untested. Now we have a chance, and this is one of the reasons why Operation Sindhu isn't over, because Pakistan gets to make decisions at this point.
Very interesting. So, in your military appreciation, the Chinese air defense system, the Chinese radars, the Chinese offensive capabilities like the PL-15 air-to-air missile, or the Chinese J-10C fighter jets, their latest, or the JF-17s, which only, of course, Pakistan uses. In your appreciation, were they found to be subpar compared to, if I may, India's BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, going more than 3 times the speed of sound, slamming into targets, decimating targets, including the Chinese systems?
Undeniable. And like you said at the beginning of the show, the satellite imagery showing undeniably that system that was meant to prevent that attack didn't work for you. So that's undeniable that the Chinese systems were viewed subpar to Indian capabilities. But I also take that with a bit of hesitation, because now they get to make changes. So it isn't like you'll
Yes.
always have that superiority, but clearly India's investments, the way you put all this together, because it's not one magic capability, it's not one magic missile. It takes all kinds of systems from air, basically coverage, electronic warfare, all of this suite of systems, both offensive and defensively. India showed and demonstrated overwhelming military superiority in every aspect of that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The Harap kamikaze drones, that would slam into a radar, or the vital assets and vital points. Colonel, there's another aspect I want to draw your attention to. Was India fighting not just Pakistani terrorists and Pakistani state, their armed forces in defense of terrorists, but there are intelligence reports that seem to indicate there were Turkish drone operators and their Bayraktar, the TB2, the Yeehaw drones operated by Turkish operators. Apparently, the PL-15 and other Chinese systems were operated via remote, maybe from a third location. What does that indicate about this warfare and the future of warfare?
I mean, we've been watching for a long time, and the Turkish TB2 Bayraktar has been since 2020, if not before, a big player in this evolution of drone warfare added into a total suite of capabilities that, and this is why I viewed it was pretty alarming when I saw the drone swarm that was sent towards India, because that's a tactic in the modern battlefield as well. Is you start with the drone swarm to overwhelm the air defense systems, and then you follow that on with missiles, demonstrating this swarm attack. That luckily that wasn't happening because India's capabilities were so. The third order and the basically offsetting capability, where you offset a capability from where your deception is always a part of the game. But what I take conclusively is what they were definitely trying to destroy targets in India, and were unable to do that despite the tactics that they attempted to use based on their Chinese advisors as well.
Interesting. Chinese advisors telling the Pakistan army what to do, Pakistan army unable to deliver. Future warfare is something we'll talk about. The manner in which Pakistan has been hit, there are intelligence reports that seem to indicate they've lost an advanced airborne early warning and command and control system. They've apparently lost a couple of F-16s. They've lost some JF-17 fighters, and the damage across air bases from Noor Khan to Sargodha to Jacobabad, from Skardu to Bhulari in Sindh, the Malir cantonment radar. Is this perhaps the highest cost imposed on terror ever? If you were a Pakistani general, if you were Asim Munir, what would be going through your mind?
Well, I've heard that that was an amazing breakdown, and you could do my job for me. I've heard that there's a lot of instability within the Pakistan military right now because of this. It's embarrassing that all your work showed not to do what you said it could do. Um, I think there's a lot of interest to do some rapid changes. This is where the enemy always gets a vote. The use of the proxy warfare, the investments in these technologies, they're going to try to do a lot of rapid changes so they think they can get ahead of. And this is why I view all warfare as asymmetric, because you're always trying to find your enemy's weakness and not play to their strength. So I think there's going to be some leadership changing. There's some instability there, which is concerning, but also in the technologies of they're going to try to use legacy systems and build redundancies while they look to see what actually went wrong. How did India do this? And that's that kind of classified stuff that we won't be able to see. But this is also a new type of warfare where everyone can see the results. It's some of the reasons that the disinformation and Pakistan tried what I'm calling this first to lie tactic, right? Where they were lying about how many Indian systems they downed and all of this stuff. We used to say first to the truth was the best strategy. Pakistan seemed to try the first to the lie, but in the modern battlefield, that's really hard to do when we have satellite imagery, and it's really hard to even lie to your own population. So all this builds a very concerning. If I was I'll never be a Pakistan military leader. I have a lot of problems right now, a lot of chaos and uncertainty on what the path forward with. Luck, hopefully, it's a change in culture, as in, I mean, we've had some problematic statements from even Pakistan generals saying that terror is the way forward and this is the advantage. And that'll take a lot more than just this operation to change, but this should be the start of it. And this is where I want to see global disavowalment of that state-backed terrorism within the Pakistan almost institutional approach.
And sadly, that doesn't seem to be happening. You've seen statements of Donald Trump, and this almost a 180-degree change from what he'd said in 2019 when he hit out at Pakistan for being a state sponsor of terror. I mean, considering so many American lives were lost in Afghanistan, you know that firsthand. That was because of Pakistan's military terror network and their double dealing with the Taliban, with the terrorists, and yet these statements from Donald Trump, the boathisms that he's indulging in.
Yeah, one I absolutely know. I mean, the fact that Osama bin Laden was found in down the street from the Pakistan military academy, the fact that Pakistan gave refuge to the Taliban every fighting season, they just go to the border, support of that activity. Our president is doing a lot right now. I believe in our in our new administration absolutely is against terrorism. It's against new extremist states from getting nuclear weapons. And this is another demonstration of why you don't want them to be, because they attempt to get away with all this backing of terrorism to try to do bad things. I believe that he's interested in ensuring that there is an escalation. And India and the United States have had a great relationship for a very long time, and I hope that strengthens two of the greatest nations on the earth.
Oh, absolutely. No two ways about that. When you look at India battling Pakistan, that nuclear umbrella that Pakistan had, that they can continue terror despite having nukes, has that nuclear bluff been called out? Or in the times to come, Pakistan may be even more desperate and try the nuclear blackmail, the nuclear bogies, some way or the other.
I think it's actually been called out, and I'll be focusing on. I think this is the major point, and again, international media not paying attention to this, that was a giant leap in strategic leadership to say, look, just because you have a nuclear weapon, you're not going to get away with anything. And I think it did put Pakistan on notice that all your past activity, even based on historical precedents, no longer will that be allowed just because you have a nuclear weapon. And it's reckless for you to think that. I think hopefully this changes even in deterrence theory, that it is possible to respond to this without getting to that area where somebody thinks that it's okay to just start talking about nuclear weapons. That's for survival. And nobody's threatening Pakistan's survival. India is saying no longer will Pakistan terrorism oriented at India be tolerated. Nobody's talking about to that point where you'd get to there. I think India has shown a lot of leadership in dealing with this nuclear blackmail that other countries have tried as well.
According to you, Colonel Spencer, what are key takeaways from Operation Sindhu? The biggest takeaways.
I think the biggest takeaway is that India's investments in its defense systems showed to be worth the money that they spent. The other takeaway is that India has demonstrated many aspects of warfare that others could learn from. The transparency in the operations, the civil, as in the political leadership statements immediately, the actual restrained but very deliberate use of force that isn't escalatory, but and not jumping up the escalation ladder. There's the biggest one, of course, but I think is just the sheer, because I deal in war, and people have lots of ideals on war. The objective analysis of this is India showed its superior military capabilities and strategic independence.
Information warfare is an integral part of war, especially going ahead. Is that an area where India needs to do a lot more? Because Pakistan's misinformation and disinformation campaign, and your appreciation why a section of the Western media, academics and analysts are unable to accept the truth.
It is a big part of modern wars. I think more than some people recognize, and this is why I'll be using India's case study as what it takes as a nation to respond and put out information. You can't respond to information; you have to put out the truth, and that has been the biggest thing that has helped the world see through Pakistan's lies. I mean, when you have the New York Times calling out Pakistan's lies, that's pretty impactful because they don't usually do that, in my personal opinion. But do I think that India could have done better in information operations space? That's a great question. You can always do better, but I think this is a demonstration of what right looks like. Just the immediate communication, all the ministers on the same sheet of music, the military giving exact details, the following of the laws of war, all of that was an immense demonstration. But this is a small test. We'll see what the path going forward, because now there's even more misinformation is coming out about what will happen and what is the future of this. But it's been interesting, and I think India's approach even to the Western media, like, why are you keep saying certain things, whether that's Trump statements or Pakistan statements, and thinking there's a balance. I saw somebody talking about both sides. Look, we need moral clarity. Like, there's only one country sending terrorists into another to do terrorist attacks, and it's not India.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And especially as somebody who's covered counter-terror operations for over 2.5 decades, it's absolutely bizarre the manner in which some in the West are unable to accept the truth. Even when you speak of Western publications, if they're accepting the truth, but it's almost as if half-heartedly, because there's so much information in public domain, there's so much transparency in the battlefield. Because Balakot 2019, they didn't, despite facts being put out in public domain, future of warfare, future of Operation Sindhu. You think, with your experience looking at urban warfare in Afghanistan and Iraq, and especially Afghanistan, because Pakistan had a major role there, will Pakistan once again hit back? I covered the Kargil War of 1999, and even when Pakistan was retreating, defeated after a ceasefire, it kind of struck back. It was beaten back, but it did. And the impression is that even when they're retreating, there is a counter attack that they do. SOP, that standard operating procedure with them. You think it'll happen once again here, either through terrorists or through their armed forces?
Yeah, one, I don't think they're going to give up on their state-backed of terrorism, even though this is a strong new doctrine that's been established. But they're willing to sacrifice terrorists. It is a great question. I try not to get into forecasting because I understand how uncertain it is. I personally believe that I don't think they will. I think this was a very methodical action, counter reaction. And now we've seen the immediate lies trying to save face within themselves. I see signs of that they're not going to, but this is why war is more than just military, right? So even India's diplomatic position that like the Indus water project is like until you change your behavior, then there's no reason to have this relationship. Then they want to have a relationship. I personally don't think there, but we put rational actors, and sometimes you have extremists who defy rational actor. Like there's a consequence if you do a counterattack and you think, and that's what we call deterrence theory. I have a gut feeling that they won't, but even a broken clock can be right twice a day, and I don't want to do that kind of forecasting.
Okay, but you think that costs have been imposed on Pakistan, and deterrence? India was able to send across that message when 13 air bases and their radars were targeted from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir down to Sindh and as deep as Sargodha.
Absolutely, a cost and a message, right? So there's a dual objective here. You want to impose the cost for an action, but also send a message of, look, I'm demonstrating a capability in case you miscalculate and want to have a counter attack. So I think it was both absolutely the cost for both the terror attack and the military attack, and both times a message saying, look, we can de-escalate at this point, but I'm sending you a message. I can hit you anywhere at any point.
And they understand that message in your appreciation, whatever's followed, and you've been able to study that since the 10th of May?
I absolutely think so, and they also understand that their lies aren't working based on satellite imagery and intelligence reports and things like that.
Colonel Spencer, for joining me here on India Today. As always, many thanks. You've been able to set the record straight as far as Western appreciation of India's Operation Sindhu is concerned. And because you're a soldier, because you're an academic who's studying urban warfare, you think this is an operation that, before I let you go, this is an operation that would be studied in as response to Islamist terror, global Islamist terror?
Absolutely, and we'll look back at this being a turning point. I think this is a turning point to at least one nation's backing of terrorism that could be replicated with other nations. I will be studying it more in detail and make sure I articulate the lessons that should be learned from it. And I think other people are currently in my circles within national security and professional military education. But I think we'll look back at that it was a turning point, especially for India, but also for the approach that nobody globally should be accepting for terrorism in general.
I will let that be the last word. For joining me here on India Today, Colonel Spencer, many thanks.
Thank you.